Hi again guys, and welcome to episode 27 of Global Contenders, the review series for Gran Turismo's touring car lineup. And as far as fictional touring cars go, the Skylines and also the R35 GTR touring car as well are among the best touring cars you can get. And not only are they brilliant as fictional cars, but they're also just good in general. Not just as touring cars even, but just as race cars in general on Gran Turismo. They're popular, they're affordable, they have very impressive specs, and being Skylines, not too surprisingly, they're very competitive. Now we're running through the different GTRs, of course, first the R32, then the R33, now the R34. Now visually, this is pretty much the most understated of the Skyline-based touring car series. It has a relatively modest body kit. The visuals, in fact, overall aren't really changed that much from the normal Skyline. It's basically just beefed up with the details rather than the overall shape. Whereas with the R32 and the R33, they really did completely overhaul the way that those cars look. Now this particular vehicle, again, keeps in tradition with each of the touring cars in that the specs get more and more impressive with each incarnation. Now the price is increased by another roughly 30 grand on this model compared to the others. The price jumps from around 230 grand on the other two Skylines to 261,000 on this car. That being said, that's still a really good price. That's a little bit more expensive, about 2 grand more than a TVR Speed 12. And for a full-on touring car, that's not a bad price. Now, the engine, as you would probably assume, being a Skyline, is a 2.6 litre. It retains the all-wheel drive advantage, which all of the GTR touring cars have, which is to be noted. That means that, for instance, in wet weather or on lesser tyres, you will have an advantage. And that 2.6 litre engine, in the case of this R34 in particular, is putting out close to 1,000 horsepower. This is slightly more powerful than the road version. The road-going GTR, the premium one that is, puts out 964 horsepower. This car puts out 966. And that's some serious power for a touring car. It's not the most powerful of this series, but it is one of the most powerful. It's more powerful, in fact, than all of the DTM machines. And that's pretty impressive. Now, as far as torque, the great thing about Skylines is that despite being relatively small in capacity, the engines have so much tuning potential, and not just with regard to power. Most Skylines put out huge amounts of torque also, and that's the case with this car. 835 foot-pounds is serious territory. That's a good 200 or 300 foot-pounds more than even the best of DTM machines. Now the weight on this particular car is a little bit less than some of the other Skylines at 1130 kilos, which is reasonable. It's not amazingly light. That's over 100 kilos heavier than something like a CLK or an Astra or an Audi A4 touring car, but still, given the all-wheel drive, the fact that it's not a real car, it's not quite as heavily overhauled as a DTM car, all of those things put together mean that that's a pretty reasonable weight. The horsepower per tonne is, as you'd expect, very high, 855, which is serious territory for any vehicle, let alone a touring car, and all of this for a price of 261 grand is potentially a very good deal. Now the PP on this model is significantly higher than the other Skyline touring cars. They sit at around 630, 650 or so PP. This one is 676. That is extremely high. That's as high as some prototypes, in fact. That's higher than the Nismo LM car. That's serious territory for a touring car. So the question is, although it's good for the price, can it actually live up to that kind of potential that polyphony would indicate, based on the numbers at least, that it has? Because the road-going Skylines are brilliant. Is that passed over to the touring car? Well, in some ways, as you'd assume, it is inferior. Basically in the same ways as the R32 and R33, and that is primarily with regard to top speed. The top speed does drop significantly on this car compared to the road version, as you'd assume it would. It's less aerodynamically efficient for those kind of speeds, because of course you're producing significantly more downforce and have so many more aerodynamic aids which cause drag that the road car just doesn't have. So even when you reduce the downforce on this car, in effect you are still putting out a lot more downforce than the road car would be, and that works against you significantly. You've also probably got a flat floor on this car, fitted as standard, as many of the touring cars have, especially the fictional ones, and that also affects your speed. Overall though, all of these things with regard to aero add in different ways. They do reduce your top speed and to some degree your acceleration, but of course they do also improve handling, and in particular grip. Now the Skyline already has fantastic levels of grip, and it's not just about being grippy. Certain cars have really good levels of grip, but that's not always a good thing. For instance, if you compare a Skyline and the level of grip that it has to something like an Evo, they both have huge levels of all-wheel drive grip, but the Evo can sometimes feel like it has almost too much grip, which is a problem that the Lancia Delta can sometimes have also. It makes the handling heavy. The Skyline doesn't really have that problem. It's perfectly balanced, perfectly weighted, and the grip will actually break at a certain point, especially to the rear wheels, and allow you to actually slide the car through a corner to some degree, which actually can really help you in certain scenarios, not just for the road car but for the race cars as well. And to some degree that is still the case with this touring car. Now it's not quite as tail happy as the road version because of the downforce, but it can still do that when you need it to. Now the Skyline or GTR in general is pretty much always a safe bet to go for on any Gran Turismo game because it's always treated with a lot of respect. And so overall it's an obvious thing for me to end up saying about this car, but yes, it is brilliant. And if you need a strong all-round touring car, one of the strongest in fact, especially for the money, definitely check it out. It just depends which Skyline you want basically. But that's it overall for this particular pick. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.